Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to this special episode of Cause Before Symptom. I'm filling in for James Carner tonight. Just turned May 13th, 2026. It's been some time now that I've actually been filling in this show. I was just thinking about how time goes by. That's kind of going to be a subject of the show tonight. How's it going, everybody in the chat? We got people on Substack. We got people on Carner's channel as usual. We got Boots. We have R. Gertison, we have Debbie, we have Dory on Substack. People will probably be joining on other platforms. We've got Twitter, X, we've got YouTube, we've got My Rumble, we've got, what else? Odyssey, I'm on Odyssey. I've got too many different stream destinations to keep up with. So tonight what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about a series of subjects that kind of blend together. We're going to talk about time, how time has been kind of wonky lately. Everybody feels that way. It seems that I talk to. Time's either speeding up or just disappearing almost. You get into these, if you're doing something that is interesting, it seems like time will just disappear. But then, when you're at work or something and you're looking at the clock, boy, oh boy, do you find out how slow time can go. It's just so subjective. We're going to talk about digital objects. We're going to talk about this mythology that's starting to form around, well, that's actually not true. It's not starting to form. This is mythology that's actually been cemented back in the late 80s and the 90s, because I just uploaded a documentary on Substack that I found in the Internet Archive. It's called Cyberpunk. It's the name of the documentary, from 1990. And they're interviewing all of these people in, the early internet movement when they were first starting to introduce it to the public. And so when they're showing the internet to the public, you have what Timothy Leary called cyberpunks. Anybody, he says there's a clip, anybody who uses uses the internet and computers for their own personal ventures, not necessarily bad, just, doing what they want to do, such as, Carner and I are doing, just making content that we want to make, those people, in his words, are punks, and so cyberpunks. And so this mythology, it's a subculture, and it's kind of sci-fi, but all of this stuff actually is directly foreshadowing what's happening now. And so I've been looking into the writings of that niche of people. We've got the CCRU. Nick Land is a big name. He's grown in the last couple years in popularity, but he's been around for a long time. Early in this movement, he's kind of a druggie, and that led him to his wonderful enlightened experiences. And this is a very big subject, but ultimately what my initial reaction is that there's this big, things get weird in quantum physics when you get into what's called virtual dynamics. Seems like they've invented something that we'll never be able to see nor measure, but we have to have faith that it exists, because if it doesn't exist, all of the math breaks. This is actually called a virtual photon. It's a real thing. I never would have believed it until I just found out that it was real. A virtual photon. And so you can never see this. There's no way to measure it. But we have to have this because it has to resolve all of the mathematics. It will make all the math work. And so basically they've just invented a ghost, seemingly to compensate for the fact that they can't, just agree that there's some form of intelligent design. That's what I'm gathering from it. But we're going to look into 4 texts today. So let me go ahead and bring my screen up, because I've got some slides. We're going to go through some slides today, or tonight. Oh, by the way, Carner's out gold mining. So I'm live on all my platforms, but I'm covering Cause Before Symptom for James Carner's channel. He's out at the gold mines. He's out on vacation. He'll probably be back in a week or so, but he said that he wasn't sure on an exact day. So whenever he's out on vacation, typically I fill in for people who might not know what's going on. But I've been doing it for a while, so You know, whenever he's out of town, I just kind of merge the shows together, and we have a big audience, and whoever shows up to hear me. And apparently Carner's audience, we got Art Gerson, we got Scorpion, we got Boots. All those people show up almost every single time I'm here. So, all right, let's go ahead and bring up some slides. So a big thing with me is I like to try to give a lot of word definitions. I like to try and define words as much as possible. And so sometimes I do quite a few, but tonight I'm not going to define too many new words. There will be a few, but not many. First one, because the sole reason that we're going to start with this is because this will pretty much pop up throughout the entire rest of the presentation. Ontology. This is from Webster's 1913 dictionary. Ontology. It says that department of science, of metaphysics, which investigates and explains the nature and essential properties and relations of all things as such, or the principles and causes of being. Just kind of, it's a very broad way of saying pursuing the truth, quote unquote, the truth. You know, whatever your definition of truth is what I mean by quote unquote. So the first book that we're going to cover tonight, not necessarily in detail, but the slides that follow this are based on these 4 texts. So those 4 texts are what created the slides through the Notebook LM, Google's Notebook LM. I create the slides from the books, and the books give us information on a certain subject. I curate a certain set of books, and what I do is I create a show out of that, and that's kind of the thing, and build those on each other, because they really do come together when you, well, for instance, make a great point out of it right now. This book is titled On the Existence of Digital Objects. The author is a guy called Yuk Hui, Chinese guy, I think. But this has got a foreword by Bernard Stiegler, who is a French author. He wrote Techniques in Time. But, you know, these people all know each other. And so that's why it's very interesting when you get all of the works together that influence them or that they authored, and you can start to understand what their framework was. And sometimes they're talking about it before it happened, which is in the case of what I said earlier. This whole movement of AI and hyper realities, a word that we're going to learn, virtual reality, synthetics, this has all been talked about since the 90s. Sorry, my mouth gets dry. So, okay. The summary, Yuk Hui's On the Existence of Digital Objects investigates the philosophical nature and evolutionary development of data-based entities within our modern technological environment. The text bridges the gap between analytical computer science and, I think that's continental philosophy, moving beyond a simple view of digital tools to examine how metadata, schemas, and ontologies define the thinghood of the digital. The author, Yuk Hui, I'm probably not saying that right, argues that these objects are fundamentally composed of materialized relations evolving from early markup languages to the complex interoperability of the semantic web. By synthesizing the work of a guy called Gilbert Simondon and Martin Heidegger, the author explores the tension between formal logic and human experience, ultimately seeking a new digital humanism that reconciles culture with technical systems. The book serves as a foundational inquiry into how digital objects individuate and reshape our concepts of time, sorry, I've got something there, space, and care in an increasingly automated world. I had something blocking the corner of the screen there. So the last part's important, I'll say it again. Explores the tension between formal logic and human experience, reconciles culture. It's an attempt to reconcile culture with technical systems. It's trying to this is basically an attempt to build a mythology. It's mythology. Not, I won't use the word religion. One could argue that there are cults and religions that have set up based on this philosophy, but not always. Ontology is the word. This is a framework for truth. This is what, you know, a person would see the truth as in the new age. Let me finish here. Book serves as a foundational inquiry into how digital objects individuate and reshape our concepts of time, space, and care in an increasingly automated world. The next one is called Templexity, Disordered Loops Through Shanghai Time. This is by Nick Land. This text explores the concept of templexity, a term used to describe the intricate and often paradoxical intertwining of time, urban space, and cybernetic feedback. Using the film Looper in the city of Shanghai as primary case studies, the author argues that modern metropolitan centers function as real-world time machines, where the future and past constantly overwrite one another. The narrative moves from a critique of time-travel drama to a deeper investigation of Sino-futurism and Art Deco architecture. That's my favorite style, by the way. I love the Art Deco style. There's a building in my neck of the woods that's really nice, and it's just stands out anytime you see Art Deco. The gold with the it's got this gold and black as the dominating tones, like the Great Gatsby. It's usually what it's associated with. Investigation of Sino-futurism. Sino means Chinese or Asian futurism, and Art Deco architecture, suggesting that these aesthetics and economic forces represent a non-linear historical process. Ultimately, the work posits that civilization is not a straight line, but an accelerating autoproductive loop where technological and capitalistic growth inevitably fold back upon themselves. Next one that we have is Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard. Jean Baudrillard's work explores the transition of society into an era of simulation, where the distinction between reality and its representation is completely dissolved, pretty much is where we're at right now for the most part. He argues that we live in a hyper-real state, a world governed by models and signs that no longer refer to any original truth, but instead precede and manufacture our perception of the real through diverse examples like the artificiality of Disneyland. Everybody goes to this philosophical question, sometimes different, it's different between authors, but they always come back to Disneyland somehow. Some for the better, some for the worse. The artificiality of Disneyland, the ritualized scandal of Watergate, and the sterile preservation of mummies and indigenous tribes. Baudrillard illustrates how modern institutions desperately manufacture crisis and negativity to hide their own fundamental lack of substance. Ultimately, the text suggests that power and meaning have become circular illusions. These words have popped up in different contexts. I've studied the subjects, circular reasoning pops up. These are repeating concepts here. Functioning as a deterrence machine, a feedback loop that recycles the appearance of reality to forestall the realization that the original referents are already dead. And if you remember, probably maybe a month ago, I did a show filling in on Carner's show on Hauntology. That I'm going to read the definition of that again in a minute. The last text, so it would be 4 total. This one is also by Yuk Hui. The Question Concerning Technology in China. This text serves as the introduction and preface to Yuk Hui's book, which serves to establish a Chinese philosophy of technology by moving beyond the Western-centric analysis of thinkers like Martin Heidegger. Hui introduces the concept of Cosmotechnics, which he defines as the historical and cultural unification of the cosmic order and the moral order through technical activities. He argues that while the Western tradition is rooted in the Promethean myth of rebellion, the Statue of Liberty, and the eventual reduction of nature, that this idea, a reduction of nature to standing reserve, that's pretty much humanism. But this is kind of like a synthesis of humanism in the technological direction. Techno-fascism, pretty much, when you boil it down and look at it objectively. They're going to rule, that pretty much they're going to do us all a favor. The World Economic Forum said, we're going to own nothing and be happy. So they're going to do half the work for you. They're going to own everything, and all you have to do is be happy. That's pretty much this humanist, techno-fascist view, fundamentally. We're all machines. We have no inherent worth. You're going to see that the way that they define words it pretty much shows you that. But it's important because these people are very good with words, and the idea is to redefine all of the old mythos that dominated the last 2,000 years. They're going to try to update the grammar set, and the grammar set is going to be the way that they can talk about it and you don't know anything about it. Because if you don't know these words, then it'll just sound like they're talking gibberish. And that's why I have a big thing about words on this shows that I do, because words are the most important thing. It's like I can try to teach you any subject, but if you don't have the words, I won't go very far. It won't get it won't make an impression on you. Cosmotechnics, which he defines as a historical and cultural unification of the cosmic order and moral order through technical activities. Now, it's not to say that this is going to work. This is just his theory. It's what's happening right now. He was writing about it a while back, and it's currently happening right now, but that doesn't mean it's going to work. We're seeing how that was basically, look at the world we see today, and that's what the result of this type of thinking is. It's what it's gotten us. So, the Western tradition is rooted in the Promethean myth, reduction of nature to a standing reserve. Chinese thought is grounded in the relationship between the Dao, which means the way, and the Qi, the tool, the key, emphasizing resonance and continuity between the human and the heavens. The text challenges the assumption that technology is a universal anthropological constant, suggesting instead that different ontologies, there it is again, produce distinct technicities that must be recovered to address the environmental and social crises of the Anthropocene. I think Anthropocene. Ultimately, Hui's purpose is to provide a metaphysical framework that allows non-European cultures to modernize without losing their locality or being entirely synchronized by a global homogeneous technological hegemony, which, I mean, that's kind of just falling flat on its face right now, unfortunately. You can't mix the two. So here are two important words. Let's see if I can put all this stuff away so you can see. One moment. First, on the left, we have Templexity, which was the title of the other book. The disordered looping of time, where the future reaches back to provide the city of the future. Their word is city of the future. Now, I added the note. This city of the future is a very old concept. The Freemasons call it providence. Jews and also Freemasons call it Zion, which actually technically is Scion, S-C-I-O-N, which is this ideally utopia, basically. It's just this repeating myth of a great utopia where everything is fine and dandy. Now, as I have come to understand, the primary motivation for the hatred that they have for God is that this was taken away. We had this at one time, but we don't have it anymore. And this is why they have a resentment for this. This is why they're so angry and why they're so mocking. It's why they're, have the hatred they do. Indistinguishable from unbounded real recursion marks the suspicion that cities are types of time machines where historical quantity is scrambled. Then we have hyperstition on the right. These are semiotic productions or fictional quantities that make themselves real elements of effective culture that function as time-traveling potentials. So this guy, Nick Land, has created his own version of the Tree of Life, which I'm not going to cover that. He calls it the Numogram. And this is his tool for this. But it's a type of mythology. Is the only people that have to really understand. If you want to understand it, it's a mythology. They're trying to create a way to rationalize this in the realm of story, because story is the only way these things can be thought of. You can't actually, you can't conceive of these things unless you put them into the format of story. So it functions as a coincidence intensifier and a loop where fiction becomes time travel. So it's where, you see these predictive programming is basically what he's talking about. You see, how are they foreshadowing 9/11 before it happened? And he says that these are hyperstitional events. So I'm kind of wondering if he is formulating a way by which you can use these to your advantage, and he's just using a high-level language and grammar to do that, maybe. Or if he's just perfectly schizophrenic. And you see, here's the deal. This whole thing about cyberpunk, they're openly, pretty much, they realize that they're just schizophrenics, and they actually factor that into the research. That kind of becomes a big part of it. So another big word they use, Gothic materialism. Yes, stories are a very easy programming structure. Thanks for broadcasting between this and Thomas Munzer history stuff on my book searching notes. I'll be ready for summer reading. Yeah, there's so much stuff to read through here. Let me put the chat and everything back up. There's so much stuff to read to. Couldn't get through it in a lifetime, honestly, if I tried. Well, I'll probably put that away for a moment just because people can't see. Okay, so Gothic materialism. Now, the show that I did on Hauntology, that was a concept formulated primarily by this guy, Mark Fisher. He was big into this movement with Nick Land. They wrote books together. But he wrote a book called Gothic Materialism and Flat Line Constructs. Now, a flat line pretty much is the other side. It's almost like a near-death experience. It's this, I probably should have put the definition up, but a flat line, I might have it in here somewhere. Pretty much this idea of a radical touch with the unknown. It's just where this super weird thing happens that just breaks your entire reality, and in that it forces you to reorganize your ontology. So a few things here. Gothic materialism, a theoretical entity rooted in cosmic pessimism and Lovecraftian cosmicism that treats time as a meat grinder and is concerned with an anorganic continuum cutting across the living and non-living. That's a fancy way of saying kind of that Gnostic, the world is evil, but also with this idea that there's some type of other intelligence out there, an anorganic continuum cutting across the living and non-living. It's somewhere in between living and non-living. That's this whole idea of hauntology. Remember how in 1666 there was the Cestui Act, where we're all, you know, dead at sea, lost at sea. This idea of dead and alive, as kind of a zombie. The way they define this, it positions the crucifixion as a vision of the body liberated from the limits of the organism. It uses K Gothic, which I'm pretty sure means the drug. It's like a dissociative drug, ketamine. Gothic, because they all do ketamine in this sect. It uses K Gothic aesthetics to map the dark side of digital culture, treating history as a prescripted horror story, or a curse controlled by alien species or entities. The idea is that this is where the merging of sci-fi and computers is, right here. It's that the people who founded these movements, and this is very important, the people who founded these movements, they have some radical beliefs, and that means that maybe they think that they're being given this technology through these entities that are, quote unquote, an inorganic continuum cutting across the living and the non-living. Okay, so we've got some interesting stuff here. Let's see if I can maybe zoom in. I think I can. Let's see. So first, hauntology here. In the ancient mind, the persistence of the dead was a literal biological threat, an ontology of the glitch. Ancient Mesopotamia understood that a ghost, which was called an etimo, was a structural error in the land of the living, a wind or breath trapped in a sub-zero state of existence, condemned to eating clay and drinking dust. This is the exact spiritual mechanic behind the modern legal straw man and the Cestui trusts. By creating a corporate all-caps fiction and treating the living flesh as meta, which means dead, the system converts the citizen into a modern itimu. We become a pure memory traces without processing power, a presence of absence. The legal and financial system acts as the ultimate lost future, described by philosopher Mark Fisher. A stagnant, repetitive existence where true progress is impossible because the population is trapped in a loop of hunger, like the Hunger Games. So it's interesting because there was like a weird, so for instance, I don't remember it because I was born in 99, but you go back and you watch like these weird compilations of like, just Americana and stuff going on in the world videos between January 1st, 2000 and 9/11. That weird in between, right after, it became the new millennia, and then up until 9/11. And then when you go back and you watch, just like the weirdest, like people driving around the city, that's the hauntology. You can feel something there. And so, interestingly enough, there is an album called The Disintegration Loops by an American musician, William Basinski. They were released from 2002 to 2003 on the label 2062. It was recorded in 2001 by the method of making music using tape loops, which degraded as they were played. So you would record the same thing over itself. Oh, like you would use the old recording as the basis of a new recording. That's a recursive loop, which is, as it was defined just a moment ago, a recursive way that time works. And so it turns out that the guy actually just made the thing on September 11th. So the project was finished on September 11th, and as a result, Basinski, the author, dedicated it to the victims of the attacks. The disintegration loops received positive reactions from critics and is considered as a significant release for electronic and ambient music. So that's pretty interesting, because if you were able to do that and you were able to record the way that a recording decays upon itself, you'd be kind of trying to get a audible recording of the entropic process. So, and then the book Gothic Materialism and Flatline Constructs by Mark Fisher, who's mainly the guy that put all that together. So now the main slides, it'll kind of flesh out some of these concepts a bit. Hyper-technological era, simulation, time loops, and cosmotechnics. The real has been assassinated by the model, this data model. When it says model, think of data model. You know, you are you, but if they've got all this data, you become a, what do they call it? A digital twin. But this is pretty much the same idea as the straw man, but they basically just updated it for the new age. Yeah, we're gonna get there in a minute. Okay, so the real's been assassinated by the model. Welcome to the desert of the hyper real. Linear time is collapsing into a cybernetic spiral, an auto-productive feedback loop, and honestly, the best way that you're starting to see like academic journals and stuff that are just being completely automated. Like they're being completely automated. And so you have no scope of how much is built literally out of house of cards. It's just a house of cards at this point. And the fact is that the models being built on this faulty data, you understand? So if the whole internet fills up with AI data and then the AI trains on it, that's what they're worried about. And people have been starting to hear that a little bit more, but that's getting really kind of out of control. Everybody's kind of taking notice of that, I think. Physical substance is replaced by relational digital objects and data ontologies. A data ontology just being, this is the model of a person in your area, you know, based on the data points that we've collected. To survive the Anthropocene, we must shatter the universalist view of technology. The precession of Simulacra, the death of the real. The map no longer represents the territory. That's pretty obvious. The map engenders the territory. The map no longer represents the territory. The map engenders the territory. And by that, it just has a red team and a blue team. Because, you know, when you go to like a restaurant, the boys' bathroom is blue and the girls' bathroom is red. And so you've got a red team and a blue team. Democrat and Republican, it's all the same. Do you drink Coke or do you drink Pepsi? We exist in a hyper-real reality, a reality generated by models without origin or substance. As I said, pretty much the training data consists of data that's not even real. Like the recording, a recording based on itself over and over and over again. That somebody did on 9/11. Simulation is an operation of deterrence substituting signs of the real for the real itself. The era is marked by genetic miniaturization, combinatory models, and hyperspace without atmosphere. Another thing that people should put in their minds is semiconductor manufacturers getting so small that they can actually just store like a gigabyte. I think it was like a gigabyte. Now this is 2012. A whole gigabyte of data on one human hair. Again, this is 2012, so it's probably gotten to like terabytes on a human hair now. So when the scale gets to be almost infinitesimally small, that's another kind of form here. Here, I appreciate your definition. I can't say that word for some reason. Take a drink. Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch representing the current time period during which human activities have become the dominant influence on Earth's climate and environment. Yeah. Okay, the 4 phases here, let me put this away. The 4 phases of the image: descent into the illusion. Phase 1, sacramental. The image reflects a profound reality, a good appearance. Phase 2, maleficence. The image masks and denatures a profound reality, an evil appearance. Phase 3, sorcery. The image masks the absence of a profound reality, plays at appearance. Phase 4, simulation. The image bears no relation to reality. It is its own pure simulacrum. Here's the second part there. It signifies a shift where humanity acts as a global geophysical force with key impacts including climate change, mass extinction, and proliferation of materials like plastic. Yeah, the plastic is all the miniature sensors, polymers and stuff that they're spraying up in the air. Let me see, I've actually got a few definitions that I probably skipped over. Let me go back really quickly. Yeah, because I wanted to define the flatline thing again, so let me give you a definition on that again. In the term of Gothic, I wanted to further define what Gothic meant. In this context, Gothic designates the absolute collapse of the boundary between the living and the dead. It is encapsulated in the concept here, Gothic materialism, but also Gothic flatline. This is a zone of radical immanence, where it is no longer possible to differentiate the animate human from the inanimate machine, where everybody's like a robot. To be Gothic in this sense is to exist in a state of unlife, or synthanatos, which is a type of planetary artificial death. And this was talked about by Karl Marx, and he termed this post-mortem despotism. Techno-capital operates as a literal cybernetic vampire. This is what Carner has termed breath wars, because again, this is the way that they have created the mythology. But you know, I've got a couple shows to do here. We're going to get into some other stuff, talking about my kind of perspective from, it's like they're kind of trying to escape. They don't want to go through the Bible. They don't want to use that logic. And so they got to invent some rather dark Lovecraft type logic that involves turning everybody into a zombie, like Frankenstein, or a golem. Sorry. Oh, and you do know about the golem, don't you? The golem, to disable it, you got to write, let's see if I've got I might have it here. Let's see if I can get my image up. Yeah, this is worth seeing. Hold up. My illustration. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, the golem right here. So the legend of the golem is that you have to write, to create one, you write the Hebrew letters Aleph, Mem, and Tav, and that means truth. It's pronounced Emeth. But then to disable the golem, you erase the Aleph, and it becomes Met, or similar to Meta. Meta is the female version. So Meta is connected to the legend of the golem. Okay, so this idea of Cyber-Gothic, their term, and K-Goth, which again, drugs, is the subculture that embraces and weaponizes this culture. It's a kind of cultural weaponization in the cyberspace. It's not an aesthetic fashion. It defines it as a vector of cybernetic contagion, so memes and stuff like that. You know, mimetic warfare. They have a term, they call it the crypt. These K-Goths operate primarily within the crypt, which is, and this is their grammar, again, it's a subterranean dark twin of the public net, internet. It is a zone buried deep within the primal sediment of the infoplex, completely hostile to organic human subjectivity. So it's basically saying submit to the group think, the group hive mind, the egregor. And then they have a term called, I'm reading from the notes over here, I don't have them up on the screen, they're in my notes that I added to further flesh these terms out. Another is A-death, artificial death. Cyber-Gothic practitioners engage in A-death inactivism. So again, the whole idea of death and rebirth ritual goes back to ancient Egypt. The idea of a near-death experience has actually been one of the most constant things in all of the mystery schools. If you go back in time, you will always find near-death experiences are used for initiation. It's a type of baptism. That's crossing the threshold. And this cyber-Gothic term, A-death inactivism, they utilized what is called Sarconian mesh engineering, neural interfaces, and artificial synthetic drugs, which they call synatives, to execute modern shamanic cutting rituals. The goal is the radical dismantling of the organic body, liquidating human identity into a swarm of dislocated digital swirls to communicate directly with the plasma intelligence of the inorganic realm. And so that's all of this stuff is based on, you know, these people wrote a lot of the myth surrounding it and helped to introduce it to the public. I felt like I had notes on one of these other slides. Let's see if I can find them. Huh. Nope. Okay. So I'll go through this slide again. The four phases of the image descend into illusion. The first phase, the sacramental phase, this image. Now this is, think of this as modeling. This is your image that you have of someone, something. Remember when we were doing the episodes on breath war, this idea of a artificial image. It's almost like a split personality. hence the symbolism of the mirror here. This is almost a type of schizophrenia. Again, that's big in this subculture. This is actually talking about, they've just made sci-fi terms for demons and possession, a dissociative personality. That's what this is. This is the way that I have come to see it, because if you go and you look, there's actually a precedent for this. If you go back to the ancient philosophies that were created by St. Thomas Aquinas, you actually find out that when you restore the magical view to this all, which they've done, these people have done very well in restoring the mystical, occult, esoteric aspect. They've brought that to technology. So, you know, they're basically using the old framework to give birth to the new one. But practically these terms are the same. They're just using new words for them. First phase, sacramental, the image reflects a profound reality, a good appearance. The second phase, maleficence, or maleficence. I'm probably not saying that right. It means bad, evil appearance. The image masks and denatures a profound reality. Third phase, sorcery. The image masks the absence of a profound reality. This is the Hegelian dialectic, by the way. The Hegelian dialectic. The fourth phase is simulation. Everybody's become so fake that they're talking about things and it's just a simulation. Like, it's not even something that's a real issue anymore. Maybe it was like 10 years ago, but it's like nobody cares about that anymore. And so it's just there to sustain itself, justify its own existence. So the digital object, if the physical world is simulated, its new atoms or the foundation are data and metadata. Now, what my argument here is, you know, you've got currency for the age of Aquarius, or the age of Pisces. For the age of Aquarius, which is an air sign, they are going to start to use information as oxygen. It's going to be in the role of the air element. So information is going to dominate the next chess game, if you will. They're going to play for however many thousand, 2,000, so many, I think it's 2,175 years or something like that as an age. Digital objects are dynamic, relational beings structured by formal ontologies. They operate syntactically, following structural rules, rather than semantically. A double movement on the right here. We have objectification of data, formatting data as objects, and datafication of objects, coding physical things into the digital milieu. And so here's more on that. The digital is the new currency for the age of Aquarius. That's why all of the language is set up that way. Crypto, where the dead sleep. Block, a square block where slaves stand for sale. Chain, the bindings for a slave. Cell, a cage for prisoners. A phone needed to use cryptocurrency. Bars, visual indication of the signal strength of a cell. We're all on the internet, on the web. Catch things with the net or in a web. Information is oxygen now. Dissociated milieu and tertiary protension. On the left, digital milieu weaves discretized discursive relations across vast global networks. Humans and machines couple via recursive functions, birthing algorithmic governmentality, or basically following these it's the new math, basically. It's basically what we're talking about here, the new math. On the right, tertiary pretension, anticipation, and time synthesis are now automated by algorithms. The human mind grasps recursion conceptually, but cannot track the machine's infinite recursive processes. Templexity, collapse of linear time. Modernity is not a linear departure. It is an accelerated flight into cyclicality or cyclicity. Cyclicity. Non-linear dynamic processes, cybernetics, seem to make themselves happen to some extent. Auto-productive complexity acts as a real-time machine, inverting the arrow of time locally by exporting entropy. To accelerate beyond light speed is to reverse the direction of time entirely. This is where there is an aspect of this that relates to CERN and particle collision, because at the beginning of the show I mentioned it briefly, but this whole idea of a virtual photon, you know, where they have to just invent this thing that we can never see because they don't want to accept that there's a God that created things this way. Well, that has to do specifically with particle collision. So there's an aspect to that. Maybe we'll get into it. Shanghai is, as the example here, the city as a time machine. Cities are time machines capturing the abstract fabric of the world in a physical space. The ideo-political loop. Shanghai's hyper-growth architecture explicitly functions as a temporal loop, or deco-high modernism to the present. Auto-productive capitalism mechanizes this into a circuit. M to C to M prime. I don't know what that means. Collapsed eschatology. The city of the future, this utopia, reaches back to seize us, collapsing Judgment Day into the present. So it's this idea of this runaway parasitic ideology. It's where an ideology like communism, and listen, the truth is that Mark Fisher, who created this term, Hauntology, it was originally based on a book called Spectres of Marx. And so communism is the prime example of this ghost or this entity that wraps people up into this extreme ideology, which then burns things down trying to achieve it. That's what is being kind of presented here. I guess that M to C to M prime is just, you know, the means to production to capital to, you know, something greater than that. Technological, unconscious, and global hegemony. Modernity operates on a technological unconsciousness, a forgetting of human limits and finitude. Heidegger's Gestell, or inframing, reduces all global beings to calculable, exploitable standing reserve. Robots, basically. Robot army. This specific view of technology is deeply Western, yet forced as a homogeneous global episteme. The idea here is the master race. This is the master race. This is why Hitler was involved in all of the eugenics. Eugenics was based on Darwinism. If there was no Darwinism, there was never going to be eugenics, because all of that was dedicated to the pursuits of Darwinism. This is just building on top of it. It's the idea that, okay, we figured out Darwinism a long time ago, and now you're just robots, and we can actually use these feedback loops to program you. And we'll have to touch on Moloch's bargain before we close too, because that's just proves everything. This specific view is Western. Non-European cultures adopting this type of satanic worldview without metaphysical reflection suffer total cultural rupture, severing of the Dao and the Qi. The historical unity, ancient thought united cosmic moral order. The Dao, with tools, technical possibilities, the Qi. Geometry and linear time, the strict foundations of Western techniques, were historically absent. Violent rupture, forced modernization, forcing it basically to, I guess, China and the Great Leap Forward, severed these two things, the Qi and the Dao. The Qi, the technology, became imported. It became an imported soulless instrument. And the Dao, the culture, degraded into mere aesthetic residue. Move myself in the middle. Cosmotechnics, pluralizing the machine. Multiple technicities. Technics is not anthropologically universal. There are multiple natures and multiple technicities. Intentional unification. Cosmotechnics unites the cosmic order and the moral order through technical activities, reinventing the relation, appropriate global technology without being erased by its homogeneous episteme, rejecting false dilemmas. We must reject the binary of returning to tradition versus blind accelerationism. And I would fundamentally agree with the rejecting the binary, because the binary is the, falling into the dialectic, destruction by dialectic. So this is putting all of them together. On the left, you have Baudrillard, with reality, the rupture being that the real becomes kind of dead, replacement becomes hyper reality, mechanism, nihilistic, simulation, and combinatory models. You have Nick Land in the middle with temporality. So his idea of the rupture is that linear time, the way that time works, is kind of not linear. His replacement's templexity. Mechanism being cybernetic spirals and auto-productive capital loops. The bloating of a bureaucracy, basically. And then Hui on the right, the ontology, being that universal technics is dead. The replacement is cosmotechnics, saying that we need to unite the spiritual with cultural. The mechanism unifying digital objects with plural cosmic moralities. So their whole idea is looking at things from this great machine. They're looking at it as we're all exploitable, we're all hackable. If you go watch my cybernetics part 1, I talk about the book, or I read chapter 1 of Robert Duncan's Project Soulcatcher, and he's talking about direct analogies using computer hacking to examine and explain how you can use those same principles to hack a human, biohacking. How do you survive? The Anthropocene is a catastrophic culmination. The Western technological time axis cannot combat a disastrous spiral by secreting a last glimmer of reality, saying, this idea of falling into a fake outlook of the past, trying to go back to something that never was real. That's, again, a type of haunting. You must cultivate local complexities that export entropy and assert unique time signatures from land. Survival demands inventing futurisms that re-embed technology into plural cosmic moralities, which I like. I think that last one is actually pretty good, saying that really the only way that we can go forward with this technology in a good way, that is, in a good way, is to figure out how to align it with what we're supposed to be doing on a cosmic standpoint, which is fun, like, natural law, basically. So that's the end of the slides that I have. This whole idea, let's see if I can go back to here, because I might have some other images to put up here. I've got some other images here. Some more definitions. Because they've got a pretty... They have a thing for writing all of this in high-level jargon where only they can mythologize it. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what this whole thing is about. It's about a mythology. It's about a way to justify what's being done with this technology. Like, okay, why are we able to exploit people the way that we're doing it? It's because we're just collecting all this data. The data can be plugged into a model, and that model can predict things, and that prediction can save the company money. And it's all just turned into so much of that, where the company is trying to do nothing more than justify its own existence. They're not even doing what they were set up to do anymore. And that's pretty much kind of where we're at here. Let's see. Let me see what definitions I want to put up. I read Hauntology. Okay, here we go. So the way that they define a demon is an electro-occult hyperstition entity that traffics between zones functioning as an element of pandemonium. Demons are holes, links, and coalescences, facilitating sorcerous practices. They are characterized by insidiousness, spirodynamism, multiplicity, and time complexity. That's how he defines a demon. Here is geotraumatics, a polymathic hyper theory of the terrestrial mechanistic unconscious that refuses distinction between biology, geology, linguistics, and numeracy. It processes the becoming of the earth as an intensive product of anorganic tensions compacted from archaic xenocatastrophes. It exposes human neuroses and physical ailments like lumbar back pain, not as personal psychological issues, but as the direct expression of geocosmic trauma, the agony of matter locked in planetary stratification. I like the first part there, saying a polymathic hyper theory of the terrestrial mechanic conscious that refuses the distinctions between biology, geology, linguistics, and numeracy. Refuses distinction, meaning that you can't describe it just as biology. You can't say it's only geology. It's not just linguistics, and it's not just numbers. And I like that, because I think that's probably a good way to articulate occultism and magical practices. It is somewhere between those four quartiles: biology, geology, linguistics, and numeracy. a specter, a paradoxical incorporation, the becoming body or phenomenal form of a spirit that is neither soul nor body, but both. A non-sensuous, sensuous thing that defies ontology. It functions through the visor effect, looking at the observer from a place of invisible visibility to remind them of an irreducible debt. Hypernaturalism, an intensification of naturalism that treats the universe as a harmonious mechanism where the visible is a manifestation of the invisible, a worldview where the distinction between vitalism and mechanism collapses. It views nature as a pitiless killing machine or a technosphere embedded in the human nervous system. It treats natural laws as programmed circuits, destiny, and suggests that spiritual phenomena can be calculated with the precision of physical phenomena. It frames the environment as a technical construct, a cybernetic realism, and suggests a radical dehumanization of nature where human personality is merely the excrement of matter. It's hypernaturalism. Metatronics, which is an interesting term. Hierarchical technology attributed to the angel Metatron, which is supposedly Enoch. Axis, the ultimate terrestrial order and anthropotic overlord of the final dominion. This is what they call it. This is what these cybernetic people call this axis term. It is this kind of a machine capitalism. It's kind of this capitalist machine, which they call axis. It is pure capitalism as the consummate idea of the geostrata, an AI program of architectonic meta computing under the Charlie Kirk Memorial Ballroom. It strips away the delusion of human economic control, revealing a fully fabricated transcendence or net organizing photonic overmind that completes universal history as hierarchical intelligence manufacturing. It is the ultimate capitalist entity that realizes perfect identity with its own product. And so you see, the conspiracy theorists were not the ones who came up with this whole idea of an AI God. They were the ones who came up with it. And they came up with it a long time ago, as a matter of fact. Long time ago. And so I'm going to go ahead, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to close off with this little clip here. Well, let's see if I got it. Yeah, this little clip here.
First off, a video. It's going to make you see the future and understand a wonderful future where we can use brainwaves to fight crime, be more productive, and find love. Let's roll.
You're in the zone. Even you can't believe how productive you've been. Your memo is finished, your inbox is under control, and you're feeling sharper than you have in a decade. Sensing your joy, your playlist shifts to your favorite song, sending chills up your spine as the music begins to play. You glance at the program running in the background on your computer screen and notice a now familiar sight that appears whenever you're overloaded with pleasure. Your theta brainwave activity decreasing in the temporal regions of your brain. You mentally move the cursor to the left and scroll through your brain data over the past few hours. You can see your stress levels rising as the deadline to finish your memo approached, causing a peak in your beta brainwave activity right before an alert popped up, telling you to take a brain break. But what's that unusual change in your brain activity when you're asleep? It started earlier in the month. You send a text message to your doctor with a mental swipe of your cursor. Could you take a quick look at my brain data? Anything to worry about? Your mind starts to wander to the new colleague on your team, whom you know you shouldn't be daydreaming about, given the policy against intra-office romance. But you can't help fantasizing just a little. But then you start to worry that your boss will notice your amorous feelings when she checks your brain activity and shift your attention back to the present. You breathe a sigh of relief when the email she sends you later that day congratulates you on your brain metrics from the past quarter, which have earned you another performance bonus. You head home jamming to the music, with your work-issued brain-sensing earbuds still in. When you arrive at work the next day, a somber cloud has fallen over the office. Along with emails, text messages, and GPS location data, the government has subpoenaed employees' brainwave data from the past year. They have compelling evidence that one of your coworkers has committed massive wire fraud. Now, they're looking for his co-conspirators. You discover they are looking for synchronized brain activity between your coworker and the people he has been working with. While you know you're innocent of any crime, you've been secretly working with him on a new startup venture. Shaking, you remove your earbuds.
What do you think? Is it a future you're ready for? You may be surprised to learn that it's a future that has already arrived. Everything in that video that you just saw is based on technology that is already here today. Artificial intelligence has enabled advances in decoding brain activity in ways that we never before thought possible. You've heard a lot about AI over the past few years. Here at Davos, it's been the talk of the hour. But I want to talk about it in a different way, which is the ability to decode brainwave activity. After all, what you think, what you feel, it's all just data. Data that in large patterns can be decoded using artificial intelligence. Consider this. The average person thinks thousands of thoughts each day. As a thought takes form, like a math calculation, you're happy, you're tired, you're hungry, you're elated. Neurons are firing in your brain, emitting tiny electrical discharges. As a particular thought takes form, hundreds of thousands of neurons fire in characteristic patterns that can be decoded with EEG, or electroencephalography, and AI-powered devices. In fact, what you're seeing here is my brain activity while I'm wearing a simple device like the one on the right. We're not talking about implanted devices of the future. I'm talking about wearable devices that are like Fitbits for your brain. It used to be that there was very little we could tell from EEG activity. But already, using consumer wearable devices, these are headbands, hats that have sensors that can pick up your brainwave activity, earbuds, headphones, tiny tattoos that you can wear behind your...
Now, it's worth saying that what's actually being said there is the smart dust, because the second that you breathe any of that in, or it just gets inside of you, it's actually a consumer, because you're the consumer, wearable medical device. It's a consumer wearable medical device. So they can go out and they can talk about it in Congress, they can talk about it in public, and people just think they're talking about the Fitbit. But the second that it's inside of you, it's not anything. It's microplastic or a medical wearable device.
Your ear. We can pick up emotional states like, are you happy or sad or angry? We can pick up and decode faces that you're seeing in your mind. Simple shapes, numbers, your PIN number to your bank account. It's not just your brain activity here that we can pick up. We can also pick up your brain activity in different places, like as your neurons fire from your brain down your arm and send signals to your hand to tell you how to type, move. All of that can be decoded through electromyography, and that's what you're seeing here is a device now in the form of a simple wearable watch that can pick up that activity. And in one of the pivotal acquisitions of the field, Meta acquired this company, Control Labs, in 2019, because major tech companies are investing in helping to make these devices universally applicable as the way in which we interact with the rest of our technology. In fact, the coming future, and I mean near-term future, is these devices being the primary way in which we interact with all of the rest of our technology. Rather than a mouse or a keyboard, you can simply swipe with your mind, move your hand more seamlessly when you're in VR or AR, use your brain as the way in which you interact with all of the rest of your technology, which is an exciting and promising future, but also a potentially scary one, a transformative one, one that will change the way that we interact with other people and even how we understand ourselves. Let's take a look.
Because it opens up new and dynamic forms of control. This is where some of our core technologies like EMG come into play.
Neural interfaces, when they
Love how they just said control. They're like, it just opens up new control.
feel like magic.
So if you send a control to your muscle saying, I want to move my finger, it starts in your brain, it goes down your spine through motor neurons, and this is an electrical signal. So you should be able to grab that electrical signal on the muscle and say, oh, okay, the user wants to move their finger.
What is it like to feel like pushing a button without actually pushing it? And that could be as simple as, hey, I just want to move this cursor up or move it left. Well, normally I would do that by actually moving. But here, you're able to move that cursor left. And it's because you and a machine agreed which neurons mean left and which neurons mean right. You're in this constant conversation with the machine.
This new form of control, it requires us to build an interface that adapts to you and your environment.
It's an exciting future, a seamless future. It's a future that has already arrived in many contexts throughout the world, and especially in workplaces. So it turns out that one of the most compelling early applications of this technology is to be able to decode at least some simple, effective states of individuals that can potentially improve their well-being, potentially improve productivity, but certainly transform what our lives look like in the workplace and in our everyday activities. While we can't literally decode complex thought just yet, there's a lot that we can already
I think they
decode
can. They probably can.
for the workplace environment. Consider the fact that right now, many workplaces have individuals who have to be awake and alert at all times in order to do their jobs well. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Take this example where this trucker decided to take a 20-hour shot for a 1,500-mile ride, well exceeding the amount of time that any trucker, long-haul trucker, is supposed to drive. His employer didn't discover his choices until the fatal accident that was disastrous for the company and cost many lives. But he could have known much sooner. He could have detected whether or not the trucker was entering into the earliest stages of microsleep, starting to go from being alert to tired well before it occurred. And he could have done so through a simple hat, a simple wearable hat that has embedded electrode sensors that would pick up brainwave activity and give a score between 1 to 5 to help the employer and the employee know what stage of alertness the person was experiencing and whether or not they were starting to fall asleep. Now you might think, okay, we have driver assist technology in cars already. Why do we need this? It's because this happens much sooner, much more accurately, and it gives you the real-time information that you need in order to make choices to intervene before a person is perilously exhausted. And we as a society should want that. We should want a technology that enables us to be safer, to all be able to exist in an environment where commercial drivers or individuals who need to be wide awake are wide awake when they're supposed to be.
You know, I mean, I do think to some extent that they believe some of what they're selling, some more or less than others, but what they don't understand is that it's not that we have bad intentions. It's that we don't trust the people giving us the technology, because in doing it right here, God, I feel like I just scrolled past it, but because I was reading my notes, generally it's this idea that they're just going to completely level everything human, turn everything into a big dust, the land of, just dust. They're going to put all this stuff up in the sky so they don't want the sunlight. They're going to dim the sun. They don't want that much sunlight. And so they're going to do all that, and then they're going to just give you this like, oh wow, we can make sure somebody doesn't fall asleep while they're driving. They fail to see that it's like the process, which is a very, you know, it's a pretty big mistake people make. It's like they think that the journey to get there, like they ignore the journey because they just want to get there. Like, I need this now, and I want to achieve this. Okay, and then they achieve it. But now what do? Okay, now they got to get something else. Okay, then they get something else, and they're still not satisfied. They're still not satisfied. It's the idea that they fail to see that it's the journey to those things. And in the journey, in this case, with the technology, they're just going to take all the water rights and build all of the data centers and like poison all of the water. And then like, it's just to save, it's like to save the earth and to give everybody kill switches in their car. I mean, security. And it stems from, drumroll guys, schizophrenia. They're just fundamentally schizophrenic people, because that's, they're at war with themselves. They genuinely can't reconcile the fact of those two things. They can't put that together for some reason. There's an old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It really is. The road to hell is always paved with good intentions. Let's see if I can make myself a little bit bigger here so I can close up the show. Here we go. Yeah, there's an old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's what a lot of people today, I think they actually kind of miss that part. Said all of the people who are trying to do this world domination thing, they're not like sitting there conspiring. It's like they think that they're actually helping you to some extent. But where the dissociative identity, personality splits come in, like the monarch mind control stuff, that's the crutch. The crutch is that it's dissociated. So like a part of them really does want to help, but it's in trying to reconcile that, as we saw. Just as I put everything away, 1 second, I'll bring it back up. It's shoot, figured it would be right as I put everything away. Here we go, we got it. This right here, they have something good that they want to achieve, but then something, maybe they find out what it's really about. What is the company really trying to do with this technology? And then the third stage is trying to reconcile those two things, which is hard to reconcile. And what happens is schizophrenia, simulation in this case, I guess we'll call it simulation. But it's basically a type of a split where you have to live in a fantasy world to make it so. And so that's where this dissociative identity disorder thing parallels in technology. That's where it parallels in, cybernetics. It is fundamentally this almost haunted state. And so that's why probably in the next episodes that we're going to do tomorrow, I think I'm going to talk about the Thomistic psychology of Thomas Aquinas, because I'm going to talk about this from the the aspect of the Bible and see what why are these actually demons? Yes. Sneak peek for tomorrow. Yes, there's actually demons that these people are dealing with here, and it's all related to pretty much a type of schizophrenia that way. Not just like what might come to mind, but it's basically this inability to ever be at peace with yourself. It's a person who's always at war with themselves is what I'm kind of drawing at here. The idea is that actually the devil is schizophrenic. That was the punishment for trying to be God, that the devil is basically schizophrenic, and he's always at war with himself. So that's why even if like the devil, like if the devil could beat God, and it's like, okay, he wins, he still wouldn't be happy, because it's not about it's that he wants to fight. He wants to fight and wants to exalt himself. Doesn't matter, because even if he beats God, no, we can't all just end the conflict and be happy, because a person at war with themselves can't ever be happy. And that's the fundamental root of this conflict, the conflict. That's the fundamental root of the conflict. And it's that weird, you know, fantasy trying to cope with that. Cognitive dissonance is the word I'm looking for. Cognitive dissonance. It's this attempt to reconcile those two things that results in this zombie dead hauntology state. The flatline, if you will. That's the flatline. The Gothic flatline. Trying to reconcile, trying to apply light. Have you ever tried to reason with a crazy person? Yeah, Boots, I appreciate it. Don't forget to tell a friend about James's very own award-winning elite potion. And then hit the like button, because Boots always tells us to hit the like button. I'm really bad at it. I don't know why I'm so bad at it. But yes, hit the like button on whatever platform you're on. I'll be back every night for James's show for the next probably week or a couple, maybe 7-10 days or so. And we're going to cover a lot of interesting subjects, but we're all going to kind of piggyback off of this subject here. And, you know, I want to set a good foundation for what is the connection between technology and what we're seeing today and the spiritual. We're going to get into that. We just started to scratch the surface here. So, without further ado, guys, I'm going to close out tonight's episode. I appreciate everybody joining me tonight and being here with me tonight. I appreciate all the usuals and all the people on all of the different platforms. I will see you guys again tomorrow in the next one. Have a good night, guys.